Hello, friend. You are listening to the I Used to Think podcast, a podcast about the stories of people who are brave enough to change their mind. I'm your host, Pat. Before we begin, a quick update. I've created a Facebook page for the podcast. Just go to facebook.com/I Used to Think podcast, or you can go to the description of this episode and click the link. The Facebook page is a place for you to be able to interact more with the podcast. After each episode, I will create a post where you can leave your questions, your thoughts, your comments, your reactions to each episode, and be able to interact with myself as well as other listeners. I think it's also a great way for the interview guest to hear ways that their story has encouraged you. Okay, with that being said, today's guest is Angela. Angela and I talk about the nature of leadership and how leadership can be a lonely place to be. Angela had to be intentional in finding community and looking for friends who truly understood, knew, and loved her, regardless of her success, her accomplishments, and her status. At the end of the episode, if you are encouraged by Angela's story, as well as the work she does for Harambee Ministries, the nonprofit of which she is the executive director, I highly encourage you to find some way to support them. Follow them on social media and check out their website. I've included it in the description of this episode. Let's get started. Well, Angela, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. I will actually start with the icebreaker.
Awesome.
If you don't mind.
Not at all.
I thought about the icebreaker while I was getting my haircut this morning.
Perfect.
It was a good time to think because you're sitting in a chair and you have nowhere else to go.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what you can recall, what is the longest period of time you were without your cell phone or couldn't use your cell phone? And how did you fare emotionally through that time?
That's a great question. The longest I've gone without actually access to my phone was whenever I've gone to India on mission trips, because I choose not to get cellular service. And so my phone is a camera at that point. And usually where we were going was in the country. So it wasn't, we had access to, Wi-Fi or anything like that. And so, most of those 7 to 10 days, it was literally just a camera. And so that was it was actually pretty wonderful.
Did anyone else have cell service? Or I'm assuming
the team lead did, just because, we needed to make sure that, we weren't taken or anything. So just in case of emergencies, but yeah, just the team lead had it. But, also because it's on the other side of the world, anybody that you would talk to, when you're awake, they're asleep. When you're asleep, they're awake. True. So it's just very difficult with communication anyway. The main thing you would do would be social media, but
right.
That just wasn't something I was worried about. So it was actually pretty great. What about you? How about you? That's the longest you've ever gone.
Oh, wow. Turning it back on me. It would probably be foster camp.
Yeah.
So I've talked about another episode. I actually interviewed the camp director. That would be 6 days, almost 7 days.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's interesting because it correlates with your answer where it's very missions-based, service-based. So I actually did fine because I was just focused on the kids, focused on serving the entire week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You realize that your technology would only serve as a distraction if you were to have it.
Right.
And then, of course, I always make solemn vows to myself of, after this, I'm never going to be on my phone the way I was. And then somehow miraculously, my screen time just continues to go higher and higher afterwards. And I was well intended, but that did not work out the way I thought it would.
Do you know what screen time you average right now?
Ooh, no, I haven't looked in a while, but I do have a lot of my apps shut down after, specifically my social media apps. I can only spend an hour on them, or else I have to put in a passcode, and it's just annoying. So it's limited because I have installed self-imposed limits on how much time I should be spending on my phone.
Right. I do that too. And I think Apple probably added that feature, realizing how many people wanted to be able to have a dumb phone in a certain part of the day.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would say that after about a week, I did get antsy, knowing that my time of missions or service was coming to an end. So those cell phone withdrawals did hit me at a certain point.
Yeah, I think it's natural too, because I mean, they're it's funny now, technology companies don't hide the fact that they have designed these things for us to get addicted to. They've actually
Right.
designed it to cue our brains to release the serotonin. And it's everything is designed for us to keep engaging with it, because the more we engage with it, obviously it continues to perpetuate
Right.
capitalistic stuff and all that, whatever. But and yet we're still just like, but I can't live without it now. 15 years ago, I wouldn't have felt that way, but now it's I have to have it. And now, especially becoming a parent and now, having a spouse, like I feel like, oh, now I have reasons to need it, right?
Right.
I have reasons why
It's
I can
justified.
justify it. And right.
Sounds like you need to go
Exactly.
back to India for another couple days.
Oh, you don't have to tell me twice. I love that place. I would go back tomorrow if I could.
Nice.
I love it.
Well, tell us a little bit about who Angela is. I know you did send me your bio, but I'd love to hear it in your own words.
Yeah, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher. I am a advocate. Currently for my job, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit organization here in Pasadena called Harambee Ministries. And I'm somebody who, although I have opportunities to stand on platforms and have a mic in my hand, I'm just like regular. Like when I tell people who I am, I'm like, no, I'm regular, like, buy my pants from Costco regular, just another regular person who
That's
will
so
have
good.
meats and clothing in the same carriage unapologetically. Because I think there's this misnomer with pastors and with leaders that, just because we're in these positions that I think Western culture has elevated, that maybe that there must be something like mystical or magical about us that has gotten us there. And I'm like, nope. I just finished organizing all the toddler books on our bookshelf because my children just threw them all over the floor today, right? It's just very, very regular over here and just very clear on who I am. And I think that that's kind of, whenever I talk about who I am, I describe my life like a stew. I think a lot of people want to live a compartmentalized life where like one part of your life is over here, one part of your life is over here, and you try to keep things really neat and tidy. But for me, I found that way of living exhausting because I was constantly context switching and mode switching and trying to become whoever it was that I felt people were expecting me to be in those different spaces. And a friend of mine said, she was like, Angela, when you walk in the room as a leader, you're not less of a mom or a wife than you were before you walk, before
Right.
you're all of those things all the time. In a leadership space, sometimes they need to be mothered. In a pastoral space, sometimes they need a sister. All the pieces of me are who God stitched me together to be all the time. And so I just live my life as stew instead of the bento box,
You need to coin the term Costco regular. I think that's a hashtag
Totally.
or something.
Oh yeah, for sure. The last 3 or 4 sermons I've preached, I've kind of tested the joke, and it literally is a hit every time. And I found myself, I'm like, but it's probably one of the most true things that I say about myself. So it's also fun that it's funny, but it also is just, and it's just true.
Right.
It's 1,000,000% true. So anyway, that's me.
I'm curious from your bio, one thing that stood out to me were the names of your 3 children. You have a 13-year-old daughter named Lizzie, a 4-year-old Justise, and a 3-year-old Ayla, pronounced Kayla, you clarified here. What are the stories behind their names?
Yeah. Lizzie is my bonus daughter. So my husband was previously married, and so I was not a part of her naming process.
Okay.
And so I won't speak about Lizzie, but with Justise, when I was 14 weeks pregnant, I didn't even know the gender of the baby yet. And me and the team that I was on at that point, we had been studying the book of Acts in the early church in the book of Acts. And we had just finished reading the chapter about one of the characters in the Bible. His name is Justise, Justus. And to the best that I can figure out, that maybe that's why it was in me. But I had a dream one morning, actually. I had fallen back asleep. And in the dream, the Lord spoke so clearly to me, and I can count on my hand how many times I feel like I've heard very clearly, like the audible voice of the Lord. And it was like, Justice Lee. And I was okay. And I woke up, I picked up the phone and I called my husband and I said, I know the baby's name. And he was, we don't even know the gender yet. And I was like, it doesn't matter. The baby's name is Justice, and that's it. And I said, and we're not going to tell anybody. And we didn't tell anybody her name until she was born. Her middle name is Eliana, and it means the Lord remembered. And for me and my story, which I won't get into that, maybe, one day we could talk about that, but the Lord remembering me with my child and remembering Justice specifically with me was just a beautiful, story about me and my girl. And then Ayla, I got pregnant with Ayla 8 months postpartum. So she was a little surprise. So we were, we had a list of names that we thought about with other children, but none of them seemed to feel right. And so my husband and I downloaded this baby names app, and it works Tinder, where you sign up with your partner and then you swipe left or right on the names that you like. And when there's a match, the app goes, you guys both like this name. And so I wish I had some deep theological explanation for how we came to naming Ayla, but that was it. But her name means oak tree. And so when we kind of thought about it, it was the scripture came to us about we will stand oaks of righteousness. And then her middle name is Grace. And so I wanted her to be strong but graceful. And that is my girl up and down for sure. So so those are the stories behind my baby's names.
Ayla was the first match.
Ayla was the first one. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she was the first match, and it was unbelievable really to us that it was kind of crazy.
Do you know if the app uses an algorithm to figure out what kinds of names you like just based on syllables or?
That's a great question. I don't remember. It was pretty simple, and it literally would just pop names up to us and you just swipe left or right. And so I don't remember if we filled in a little quiz or something like that. No, I don't remember. Okay. So because Ayla it wasn't that complicated.
Nice. I'm glad I asked that question. I did not expect such a good story.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a lot.
So let's start the episode with the question that I always ask. What is your I used to think statement, Angela?
Yeah, I used to think that leadership was lonely, and now I don't at all. I've been in leadership in some way, shape, or form since I was 12, since I was a kid for sure.
Okay.
And that was a big, I think most of it was other people seeing leadership in me and seeing possibility in me and calling that out, and then also giving me opportunities to do it. I will say, as I matured and as I grew, part of that was great. And it also, at the same time, kind of grew a little bit of an arrogance in me of, oh, well, people think I'm a leader, they think I'm special. And so I think that arrogance coupled with, I had a few rough friendship experiences where, because I would be in leadership, especially in the church specifically, I was usually close with the pastoral staff or with the head pastor and their wives and all that kind of stuff. And so I had a couple experiences in my early leadership years where people basically were using me to get close to those head leaders of the church. And it just became really clear that that was the case. And so, so you have this young leader who's developing this low-key arrogance coupled with some friendships that really just went sour because of being used. And then the icing on the cake of that was I would go to these leadership conferences and they would always talk about leadership being lonely and how you have to learn how to trust in the Lord and understand that, people don't know what it's to be a leader, and they don't understand all that you carry, and they don't know all the burdens that you bear and things that. And so I have this growing root of arrogance. I have these spoiled friendships. And then I also have these leadership gurus, teaching me that, I just got to do it on my own, right? That there's no way I can have, not that it's just going to be difficult for me to have an authentic relationship. So I think all those things together led me to this place of just being a lonely leader, and I realized I would always feel it on birthdays or in holiday time, where I just realized, man, the people, I don't know who my people are. I don't know who are the folks that really know me and that love me for me and not just because of how I perform
Right.
or my talents or my networks or whatever. And I couldn't find them, and I hadn't found them in a long time. And then about when we were planning for the turning point for me was when we were planning for my wedding. My husband and I have been married now 6.5 years. And when we were planning our wedding, I was thinking about my bridesmaids and all that. And I had a falling out with who was then my best friend. And after that, the other people who were kind of in my circle, I don't know if you know me well enough to stand up with me on the most important day of my life,
Right.
the second most important day of my life or whatever, to that point. And so my sisters were my bridesmaids and they're my best friends. I love my sisters so much and both of them are so wonderful. So there wasn't anything wrong with that. But then there's the bridal shower, and who do you invite to that? And I was new on a staff at a church. And so I invited a lot of the women who were on the staff, and we were still kind of getting to know each other. And so it was just a lot of kind of fumbling through. I would like to be your friend, but you don't really know me that well, but you're coming to this event. And it feels very like, thanks for coming to my bridal shower and bringing me a present that's very expensive, even though you don't know me that well. It was just a lot of that. And I felt it in my heart. And I just came to this point where I was, I am about to be married, and wedding guests traditionally were called witnesses, and they're called witnesses because they're supposed to be the people that on this day of your life, they bear witness to the vows that you make to your spouse. So that on your toughest day of your marriage, you should be able to go to your list of wedding guests and pick up the phone to any of them, and say, I need you to remind me of the vows that I took on that day that you bore witness to. And when I had that perspective, I realized, man, these people, not all of them are that for me. And I need people that in the ugly days and the days that aren't shiny, the days that aren't on a platform or that are Instagrammable, I need people who know me, who love me, and who are willing to tell me the hard truth about whatever it is. But at the same time, I need people who, on my days when I'm questioning myself, when I'm feeling insecure, when I'm not sure about where to go, who can also look me in the eye and remind me of the faithfulness of God in my life, and call that thing out in me too. And so I just started committing to friendships and it was slow going because making friends as a grown-up is so weird. It's just so weird. People don't tell you. And it's such a crock because you grow up and your parents put you in school and you're in school and you're in this ready-made pot of supposed friendships, right? You're in this ready-made pot of people who are in the same phase of life, who are going through the same thing, who have the same leaders.
Right.
Everybody's having this similar experience, right? Obviously kids are different and there's bullies and all that, stuff and social media, all that stuff now. Being a child now is terrifying, but then it was like, that at that point, it was like, that was your reality. So you had this Instapot of friendships, right? And then college is a little bit similar because you have a roommate, but sometimes they're weird, but sometimes they're great. And it's just, you're put in these situations where getting to be known and knowing people is way more accessible in the early phases of your life.
Right. I want to interrupt quickly. I kind of want to latch onto that idea because you mentioned almost being thrust into leadership roles at a young age. And so was there a did feeling like a leader parallel being thrust into leadership positions, or do you feel like you were thrust into leadership positions first and then later on started feeling like a leader?
That's a really good question. My first gut instinct is that I was put into leadership positions, and then I think I learned by watching what a leader should be, and then recognizing in myself, oh, I can do that, or oh yes, I can mimic that, or I can emulate that value that you say is important for a leader. I can do those things, or I can be valuable to a team, and I can, I actually do have a strong personality. I remember my youth pastor said to me, like, Angela, you talk a lot. And I was like, yes, I know. And so, because that was all of my report cards growing up, I would get straight A's and be like, but she talks a lot. It's like, oh, and then she was the first one that said to me, like, so let's like use that. How do we utilize that and take this thing that's in you so that you can then lead your peers? And so it was kind of an amalgamation of both. It was both of people seeing something in me that I did not see in myself. And then as I got older, I learned how to see those things in myself. But like I said, it grew an arrogance in me that was just not necessarily too attractive.
Right.
So, but yeah, so I think it was both. Mm-hmm.
What was one of the first leadership positions you were in? Was it student council or something like that?
Yeah, it was that. But one of the first ones that I was in that I can remember for sure owning something was I was the assistant worship director of the kids ministry.
Okay.
I like had to show up on something. I was like maybe 12 or 13, and I was the leader of this part of worship and for the kids, and had to learn all the hand motions, and I would teach the kids the hand motions, and then I would lead it on Sundays and led it at Vacation Bible School, and that was a big part of my responsibilities. And then in school, it was the typical, I always was the leader and the presenter for projects, or I was always, I was that kind of leader in my classroom setting. So yeah, those are some of the earliest memories of leadership that I have.
When you mentioned the arrogance, I guess, kind of growing in you over time because of all these opportunities being in the spotlight, what is an example that comes to mind?
Oh, yes. The story that I think really encapsulates this the best is I was probably 24, and I had been attending a church for probably like 6 or 7 months. And the pastor called me one night and was like, hey, and I was, for my day job, I was working at the YMCA. I was a program director. So I worked with kids and running programs. And so he called me and he was like, hey, I need you to take over the middle school ministry. And I was like, what? So I was 24, I was figuring out how to lead myself. But, he was like, you're going to be great. I just see this in you. I think you could do it. And I was like, okay. And so that ministry had 200 kids in it, had like 40 volunteers already. It was a very well-established ministry.
Wow.
And most of the leaders were all older than me and had been there for a very long time. And so I went into the first team meeting, had my little clipboard, and was like, I'm the leader now, and these are the ways that we're going to do things, and here's some things that I'm going to change, and these are the things that I need you all to do and to commit to, and blah, 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 blah. Like, I mean, I went in hard, fast, heavy-handed. It literally is the most cringy. Like, I look back at that, I'm like, oh God, help me. It's like just so insecure and just faking it. And yeah, so, but that arrogance in me made me think, oh, this is the right way to do this. I'm definitely going to win over this team if I lead them like this. And I was just so convinced that I was right. And it really took one of my best friends. She served in the ministry at that time. And she was just like, you kind of came in a little hot and heavy there. And I was like, what are you talking about? Just like, what? No, that's what leaders do. Gotta establish authority. And she was like, that is not how the previous leader was at all. And I'm not saying that you need to be them, but this team is used to a certain way, and you're just coming in and hitting a hard pivot for them. And that just didn't go over well. And half the team quit after the first week.
Oh, wow.
So
I was going to ask what the response was.
Mm-hmm. It was quite a humbling experience. And so that was one of the first moments where I had to kind of look myself in the mirror and be like, oh, well, that just didn't work. That was a huge failure, actually. And now who can I become? I can't make up for this failure. I did that, and that happened, and I had to go and I apologized to those people. Some of them came back. Most of them didn't, which I don't blame them at all. And so And I had to start looking at myself in the mirror and be like, okay, what kind of leader do I want to become? And so, yeah, that kind of was the starting of that journey for me.
At that point, when you started asking yourself that question, what maybe resources or role models come to mind that began to form the leadership that you have now?
Mm-hmm. The church that I was at deeply valued leadership development. And so the pastor was an organizational leadership guru and had built this thing called Leadership University or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was called. Leadership College, that's what they called it. Leadership College. And so you had to be invited into this thing. And when you were in it, it was literally 12 weeks of intensive leadership principles, theological applications, and that kind of stuff. And so that really shaped my theological view of leadership. It refined my calling because I also believed that as a leader, I needed to be all things to all people. But going through leadership college helped me understand what is mine to hold, what are my strengths, what are the things that only I can do, and then how do I then resource other people on my team to be the rest of the things? Because a ministry needs to be whole, right? It needs all these things. Any team needs to be whole. It needs to be well-rounded. And the leader cannot do all of those things. So I think that part of my young adulthood, I would say the 25, 26, 27, those were really pivotal years for me of just having mentors who were helping me refine my leadership style. Still stumbled along the way, but I think I learned very quickly, this is what I'm good at. I'm not great at this. So I need to find people to bring onto my team who can help hold those other things so that things can succeed and move forward well.
Right. So classic interview question, job interview question, but what were your strengths and what were your weaknesses?
Strengths. My strength finders is positivity, woo, connectedness, communication, and competition. So those are my, according to my test that I've ever taken, those are my strengths. When I think about other strengths, I think about the fact that I am what people would call a builder.
Okay.
And so leadership wise, I am really good at taking things that are maybe ambiguous looking in the beginning. I can create a very clear vision for what it should be, and then I can pave the road and build the things necessary to get to that vision. I am also an incredible, gosh, that is so arrogant. I'm really good at encouraging people to step into their fullness. I believe in health and wholeness and wellness and us being whole beings. And so I'm also, and I don't know how much you talk about this on the podcast, but I'm an Enneagram 1.
Okay.
And so with the Enneagram and as an Enneagram 1, one of the things that is a strength of Enneagram 1s, people who have the type 1 personality, I can analyze things very quickly, figure out where the gaps are, and then create solutions very quickly for how things can move forward and be better. Now, the shadow side of that is that I'm very critical. Okay. And so part of me learning on my leadership journey is, how do I offer suggestions in a way that is empowering instead of critical and like dogging people out and making them feel bad about themselves all the time?
That's tough.
So those are some of my strengths. I also, I just really, one of the things I say to people all the time is I care way more about you than I do the work that you do, because it's true. We are whole people and we are also limited beings. And so I instituted a 4-day work week every other week with my staff when I took this job, because one of the parts of the culture that needed refining pretty quickly was just an unhealthy grind culture of just work. And as a nonprofit, it's really easy to do that because the work that you're doing is worthy, right? The work that you're doing is important, and it's about the community and it's about helping people improve their lives, right? So it's good, holy, righteous work. And yet, even in that, we can still have an unhealthy relationship with work. And God has been so clear in the word of God so I ascribe to the Christian faith. And so part of my faith is understanding that God has designed us to work 6 days and have a Sabbath, right? And a Sabbath is a protected time where you are able to remember one, that you are a limited human, you are a limited entity. And then two, figure out how it is that you reconnect to your source, and how is it that you give your body and give your mind the rest that it needs. Because what I say to my staff is, I want you to be able to do this job for as long as you want to do this job. But that won't happen if you are caught up in hustle culture, if you're caught up in grind culture, if you're caught up in this westernized view of work that says you have to grind yourself into the ground in order to be valuable. That's just not true. And so that's a big part of, I think, part of one of my strengths is being able to help reorient my teams to recognizing that value. And what I have seen is they get more work done and they're actually more productive because they are better rested. So that's good.
I want to actually, at some point in this conversation, get into nonprofits because my wife is currently a grant writer.
Awesome.
And she has worked with nonprofits in the past, and just observing her interactions and overhearing her Zoom calls, I feel I've learned quite a bit about how the nonprofit world works. But I want to actually, before we get to that, specifically about your statement. You said you used to think leadership was lonely. So what do you mean by lonely? What did you feel? What were some of those experiences? And maybe we'll start there.
Yeah. So I mentioned about my wedding. I mentioned about the relationships that kind of went sideways before. The loneliness was in times where I felt like I needed somebody who knew me and would look across my life and realize I was living like a bento box, right? This person knew everything about me as this piece of my life, or this person knew everything about me in this area of my life. But there were no people who knew all of the things that I was going through.
Right.
There was no people who knew the depth of, I'm a very deep feeler. And so I didn't have people who I felt could hold the depth of feelings. And that was what I believed. I believed that people couldn't or didn't have the capacity to or wouldn't want to.
Right.
And that was something that I had convinced myself of in my mind. It was not true. And so then I just started very intentionally and very strategically trusting the Holy Spirit to give me discernment of who can I trust my heart with. Obviously separate from my spouse, but who are some women that I can trust my heart with. And so slowly, one of my best friends now, her husband was on my team at that point. And he was the kind of guy who's, oh, you got to come over for dinner and meet my wife. Blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he was like, okay, how's Tuesday? And I was, oh, you mean that? I was like, great.
Yeah.
I'm going to your house on Tuesday. So me and his wife sat there at the table. And we're talking and talking and talking. I mean, we had been talking for 3 hours. And at the end of the conversation, I was like, we're friends. And she was like, we're friends. And literally, it was,
wink, wink.
It was this, it was like a DTR, like right there in that moment. And from that moment, she has been one of my best and closest friends. Wow. She's the godmother to my children. And she's just, she is my sister for sure. And so after that experience of, we talked, we made a decision to now be friends. And now I'm making a decision to trust you with these very messy parts of my life. And she proved herself over and over again, like, is so trustworthy. And so there's just so much trust built between us. So she was kind of like the beta test. So then from there, I started a life group with me and my husband. And I said to the people in the life group, I'm not sharing it because I was a pastor on staff at the church where we were leading a life group. And I said to them, I was like, I just need you guys to know, don't expect me to share much, at least for the first like 7 to 8 months. And they were like,
That's so specific.
It was so, because I am so weirdly specific. And I said to them, look, I've just had some hard experiences with people in my life who come into community with me and have this expectation that because I'm a pastor, that they're either going to have full access to me as a pastor, or they're going to have access to the leadership of the church. And I said, and so I just want to do life together and get to know each other. And then I can and then I'll just start slowly opening up and peeling back the layers. And, you know, from that moment on, not to say that there haven't been bumps in the road, but now those folks are the closest people to me. And their moms in that group, who we were all pregnant during 2020. We all gave birth to our children in 2020. And so it was, you know, just in the trenches, in the crucible of life together. Right? So, you know, you get really close with people when you experience a global pandemic with them, and, you know, you're all on Zoom and nobody knows what's going on. And then another opportunity was another group of women who are leaders. And it was funny because we were all at a birthday party for one of the women. And we were all, why haven't we been friends? Why aren't we close to each other? We've been in each other's orbit for 5 years. And all of us in some way, shape, or form shared what I shared. It's just really hard being vulnerable with people when you're in that leadership position, because they just already have you on this pedestal. They already expect you to be perfect. They expect you to have all this. And there's no space for us to just fall apart. And so at that birthday party, we all committed to being a safe space for each other to be able to fall apart. And it was beautiful. And that group of women has been another safe space for me. The key from me going from that lonely place to now a fulfilled place with my friendships was decision. I made a decision that I wasn't going to believe the lie that I'm unlovable. I wasn't going to believe the lie that I'm too much. I wasn't going to believe the lie that people always want something from me, because it's just not true. And thank God these friendships and relationships have proven that for me. Now, am I out here making friends with anybody who wants to be my friend? No. I joke with my husband all the time, because people are so sweet and they're so kind and so loving. And they'll hear me preach and they'll be like, I feel like we should be friends. And I'm like, do you?
That's really honest.
Yeah, you know, and some of them have turned into sweet acquaintances. But when I think about friendship, specifically in leadership, there is a mantle, there's a weight that leaders carry and wear that not everybody will understand. And that is just the truth. That is not a statement of arrogance or a statement of high and mighty. And I'll speak specifically like in the ministry context and in the nonprofit context. When you are working a role that is so mission driven, there is a reality that your being and your worth and your work become pretty entangled. And you have to have spaces with people who can help you detangle that, who can help you say, you are not your work. You are worthy, separate and apart from the success of your organization. You are worthy and you are loved, separate and apart from how your team is acting, right? Your value is not exclusively about the work of your hand. And I think that kind of friendship is something that every leader needs. You must have somebody in your life who can look you in the eyeballs and say, I love you and I care about you and I just want to hit you just because of you. That's it. Let's go grab a soda, you know?
Right.
So
to your point earlier about adult friendships, I think this is a theme that, I'm really glad we kind of got on this theme, because so I'm 24 right now, and I can relate to a lot of things that you're talking about when you were in your early 20s. But there is this, at least for me, and I'm sure for you and many others, this realization that you use the word decision, and I'll add intentionality. I mean, it feels, even that story you told about your essentially friend DTR, right? To sit down and say we should be friends, or I think we'd make good friends, and that's the type of intentionality I found that it takes to make adult friendships, and it did catch me off guard. The idea of having common space, I think, is really rare, to be able to have a place where people gather. And within secular, I guess, non-Christian culture, there aren't many. I think that's something that there's a term that maybe in academia that they've coined for just the idea of shared space, but for
Mm-hmm.
Christians, it's church.
Right.
Outside of, religious spaces, it actually gets pretty tough. It's maybe
Totally.
bars or
Meet up the softball teams or whatever
right,
in the parks, but it's not again, but that allows you to stay so surface, right? It
right.
allows you to still say so unknown. Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going.
No, that's good. Yeah. And I think it is specifically hard for men and guys to get past the surface. And I know
Mm-hmm.
because in college, I had close guy friendships, and it's because there was time involved. When you spend
Mm-hmm.
3, 4 straight years together in college, eventually, with guys, I think it takes a lot of time to eventually have a conversation where it feels more than just sports or more than just the news or politics. And another thing you brought up that I could really relate to is the idea. I think you said you're a deep feeler.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that my wife observed when we first started dating was she goes, "Wow, you're really affected emotionally by movies." I would watch a movie and I would just be like, "Man, what is life? Like, where are we going? Who are we? What's happening?" And
Right.
I don't know, have you seen the Disney Plus series Loki?
Yes. I haven't watched
Okay.
the new season. Don't tell me anything about
Okay,
season
I
two,
won't say
but
anything about
season one for
the
sure.
second one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big Disney fan, nor am I much of a TV movie watcher. But that first
Mm-hmm.
season of Loki really, I don't know, something about it, very
Mm-hmm.
existential. I also
Totally.
appreciate I also appreciate the themes of time and space. But after the second season, and I won't spoil anything, but after the second season, I remember we were just sitting on the couch and my wife is like, "Oh wow, that was a great series." And I'm just sitting there thinking like, I need to rethink everything in my life.
Right.
And
Totally. I
and
get that.
the at least for me, the feeling of I want to talk to someone about this. Who can I
Mm-hmm.
call to just
Mm-hmm.
even just say like I just watched Loki and I feel I need some more rhythms in my life or whatever it might be. And so the deep feeler, whatever you want to call it, characteristic, I could really relate to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I really think this, and again, this is something I've processed in therapy, is being a deep feeler, knowing that I'm a deep feeler, having that I had been socialized to believe again, and I think I mentioned this earlier, like that I was just too much, and like, oh, stop
Hmm.
crying, or like, oh, like calm that down, or like, please, like that's a lot of feelings. And when you hear that enough, you begin to think maybe there's something wrong with me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I heard this sermon one time of a pastor who so beautifully articulated that for those of us who do have a broad capacity for emotions,
Hmm.
realizing that emotions were given to us by God, that emotions were given, we're like literally built with these emotions, and they're not something to be scared of. They're not something to avoid. These emotions are actually there to draw our attention to something, to
Hmm.
teach us something. And so for
Draw
me,
our
what I
attention.
realized was that, yeah, like I feel these things so deeply. And I also have a pastoral calling on my life. Why did God create me with all these big feelings and this pastoral calling? Maybe
Hmm.
it's because I am built to care for the flock. I'm built to shepherd and love and see and know people and be able to step into their experiences even with them not being my own. And when I saw that, then when I saw those big feelings as meaningful, as full of purpose, it changed everything for me. And then I was able, I think it gave me a language to be able to articulate when I was having big feelings, to be able to say, this, I'm overwhelmed in this moment, but I just need to take some time. I need to process and I need to give myself some grace
Hmm.
to not rush past whatever it is that I'm experiencing.
Sure.
Because there's something there in the middle of those big feelings that I'm meant to experience. And now, thankfully, I have folks who have like looked me in the eye and been like, you're not too much. I can sit in this with you. I'm holding all this with you. And I want to be in it with you. Please tell me when you're feeling this way.
Hmm.
And that permission to just be fully myself, it was really freeing. And it's also helped me now as a mom, because I have three deeply sensitive children who have very big feelings. And so, which
I wonder where they
I
got that
can,
from.
and so I can appreciate their experiences, specifically with my littles, even at 3 and 4. I can appreciate, man, the world must be so overwhelming for someone your size,
Wow.
and also, you're your little brain is trying to process, because they've only had maybe a year of like conscious experience. My 4-year-old, maybe 2 years of like conscious experience in the world, right? That's crazy. That's so overwhelming. And the world is big and it's loud, and other kids are loud and they have runny
Yep.
noses, and your sibling is, fighting with you. It's just a lot. And I've committed as a mom to letting them know that I'm not scared of those emotions. That it doesn't change how I feel about them. It'll never push me away from them, because my hope is that me being able to sow those little seeds now will help them grow up never believing the lie that leadership or any type of relationships have to be a lonely place.
Continuing with that idea, I'm curious. So, because you mentioned that to a certain degree, leadership is still isolating just because not everyone understands maybe the ambition, the vision, the drive. So, what does it look like to balance the leadership basically naturally being isolating in some ways, and then also avoiding that state that you were in before, where it was avoidable to be that lonely?
Yeah. I have found people who are completely unrelated to the work that I do.
Okay.
So, yeah. So with my team, for example, I can't fully be myself with my team or share all of the emotional turmoil of my role, because then that creates insecurity and instability for them. Right.
Right.
But if I have friends who are also leaders in their own right and are completely unrelated to my field, to my arena, then it gives me this permission to they have no skin in the game. So they can listen, they can hold, they can counsel, they can whatever, without any skin in the game. And so they're just a leader in their own right, in their own arena, doing their own thing. So that's been really helpful. It's just having people who are removed from this world that I live in.
Right. So getting to nonprofits, how did you start at Harambee?
Yeah, it's a great question. Ooh, I was a pastor on staff at a church for about 6.5 years. And during that time, our church became really involved here at Harambee, just as a church partner. And I was kind of helping. We were planting a campus down the street from Harambee. So we wanted to be involved at a local ministry to get to know the community before we planted the church. So just started volunteering here, started learning the history of this place. It was started by a prolific civil rights leader, Dr. John Perkins. And so just learning the depth of history of this place was amazing all by itself. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the mission and the vision, and, just kind of served where I could from afar. And then in the fall of 2021, again, when I told you there's only a few times in my life that I've heard the audible voice of the Lord, God spoke very clearly to me that it was time for me to transition and just come and serve here. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know the needs of this ministry at that time. And the long story short is that it became really clear to a few key people that, oh, you need to be the executive director. And I was, all right, here we go. And because I sit at this place where I am both pastoral and administrative as well. And so I took on this role in January of 2022 and have been just really thankful for the opportunity to lead such an incredible organization and helping really guide it forward and rebuilding what it's becoming now, 41 years into its existence.
Do you feel you're at the peak, essentially, of your leadership at Harambee? Is there something about the organization that kind of brings the best out of you?
Yeah. Because this organization is all about nurturing and equipping local leadership to be the ones to solve the problems of the local neighborhood. It's very justice oriented. It's very, very much about looking at the gaps in community and figuring out how can we step in and answer the questions that the community is asking. How can we be a good partner when the community is in crisis? How can we serve in a way that is dignified? How can we serve in a way that is a response to what the community is asking, instead of saying, this is what we do, here are our services, here you go, you know? And so the way that I think it brings out the best in my leadership is it's so deeply relational. The people, to the donors, to my team, I am talking to people and with people all day, every day. There is also a strategic piece of it that really brings me to life, where I am building. The organization has been through a few different transitions over the last few years. And so I'm attempting to build structures to bring stability and sustainability to this organization. And that plays to my strengths. And so I think there's a lot of ways that it does play to my strengths. Do I think I'm at the peak? I don't know if I'll ever peak as a leader. I hope I never peak as a leader. I hope I just keep kind of going on rolling hills and just keep getting better.
I guess I don't even know the details the day in, the day out of how the organization is run and what you do, but just wanted to give you props, I guess. And then as well as just my respect for running a nonprofit, to continue what I was saying with, observations through my wife's work. I see that there's so much that goes into running a nonprofit that even is business related. Like just having that business savvy on top of being relational and having the heart and having the passion. And so I guess my question from this is, what is it about nonprofit leadership that you think is different from maybe corporate leadership or any other kind of leadership based on your experience?
Yeah. One of the things that I would say is the main difference is you have to, as a nonprofit leader, strike the balance of being missionally driven and competent. Because one, you're not going to be getting paid the big bucks, is saying we ain't doing this because we're here to get rich. That's not it. And I think if you don't have a clarified why when you're doing nonprofit work, you will not last, because on the days when it's hard, on the days where you have failures, on the days where you lose funding, on the days when you get funding, on the days where your volunteers don't show up, on the days where your staff is driving you crazy, those roads run out. But if you have a clarified sense of purpose and meaning in the work that you're doing, and a sense of personal mission alignment with what the organization is chasing after, then you'll never really run out of road. You'll always have just another infusion of gas in your tank. But the loss of sleep when I have a grant due at midnight, it's worth it. The spending time on the phone with donors who maybe whatever, it's worth it. The spending time with our people who are hurting or maybe who need support, like, it's worth it. Because this work, the work of this organization, makes me feel alive. It makes me feel I am contributing in a meaningful way to my community, which for me is a value. I think that some folks in corporate settings, like, the motivation is clear. It's money, right? And that's fine. It's money, it's ambition. That's great. It is not every day that you'll find a corporate world that also missionally aligns with your own personal sense of values and, whatever. Those jobs are out there. They're just rare. And so I think that is the decision that nonprofit leaders have had to make, is that I'm willing to sacrifice salary, my weekends, evenings, whatever, for the sake of this bigger thing that I feel is making a meaningful dent in this crazy, wild world that we live in.
Right. I'm curious specifically to Harambee's mission. What do underserved and marginalized youth in Pasadena need the most?
Yeah. A hope for the future. And I say that not everybody's walking around here hopeless, but they do walk around here with a small world, a small confined idea of what their world could look like, or what is accessible for them. So, for example, one of the programs that we run is a performing arts academy.
Okay.
And our Performing Arts Academy, we focus a lot on calling out the strength, the greatness that is in our kids. And we work really hard to introduce them to professionals who can show them what they can be or who they can be, and giving them and helping open up their world, helping open up the scope of possibility for them. We do the same thing with our tutoring program. We do the same thing with our high school entrepreneurship program. All of our goals are to nurture and equip our scholars. We call them scholars, not students, our scholars, to know that they can do more and that they can contribute now. We also have a gang violence and intervention program. And so a big part of that is teaching our kids growth mindset, right? That it's okay to fail. And it's okay to keep trying, and that you can be a good teammate and a good team member, even if today is the first day that you're going to be that, right? There's always another time to start. There's always another chance to do it again. That a failure doesn't have to be the end of your road. Regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of how many parents you have in the home, regardless of any traumas you might have endured, there's always something more, and there's always a hope that you can walk towards.
I just blanked on my next question.
That's okay. It's really exciting work that we do. I love what we do. And so it often renders me speechless too.
What is a part of leadership, speaking of growth mindset, what is a part of your leadership skills that you would like to get better at?
Oh, man. I want to get better at having harder conversations without the anxiety and the pressure that comes because of the people pleaser in me. I think that part of leadership is saying the hard thing, is saying the thing that needs to get said so that people can move past their own internal blocks, so that they can grow, so that they can maybe stop making a repeated mistake, so that relationship woundings can get healed. All of those things are really important in leadership. And as a leader, you have to be the courageous one. You have to be the one that goes first. You have to be the one that says the thing. And I'm not often afraid of saying the thing. I just take a little bit longer to say it. So if there's a hard conversation that I know I need to have, it is not my tendency to just have it right away in that moment. And I think that one of the things that I can grow in, the reason why I want to grow in it is because if I wait too long and then I have this conversation, that person could be like, what are you talking about? Like, that was what?
You're like, it's 2026.
You're still thinking about that? And so, yeah, so that's one of the things that I know I must get better at that. So I'm trying.
Awesome. Yeah. Is there anything we missed about leadership that you wanted to bring up?
Oh, yes. This is one of the things I want to say. When it comes to opening yourself up and moving from that lonely place to a place of being known, the in-between between those two things is self-awareness. The in-between of those two things is like understanding fully who you are, accepting fully who you are, all of the pieces of you. I got better at that when I started therapy, when I started looking at the patterns that I have, looking at the history of my life and how I got shaped and molded into the woman that I am today. What made me me? What happened to me that now I'm in this place? And who do I want to be in the future? And how can the pieces of my past and the realities of my present and the hopes for my future help kind of mold me into who I want to be? How can they clarify my image bearing, right? And I think I'm a better friend now because I am just so aware of my own self, right? And I also am so much better at telling the truth about myself without feeling I have something to prove, without feeling like, oh, if I say this, are they not going to like me? Not to say that I don't get insecure sometimes, I don't get anxious. That's the truth. But I can say those things without fear of losing all of my friends. I can also tell the truth about my strengths and the things that I know I'm good at, because now I'm not saying it from an arrogant place. I'm saying it from a secure place of I know unequivocally that this is who I am, and I want to offer it to you, and you could take it or leave it. And if you leave it, that's all right. It doesn't change my worth. It doesn't change my value. And that all came from deep inner work. And so I would encourage any leader who is like hoping to level up or increase your ability or increase your capacity as a leader, go to therapy. Like find an executive coach, find a personal coach, find a therapist, find someone who can hold up a mirror to you to help you see yourself so that you can take steps forward in becoming a better version, of a stronger version, of a more whole version of yourself.
This reminds me of why I started the podcast. One of the reasons being for people my age. I mean, obviously I have listeners all different ages, but when you brought up earlier, one thing about leadership is try not to be everything to everyone or all things to everyone. As I think as a young person, especially with social media, then there's a temptation to mold yourself into, and at least for me, mold myself into a certain version. And I think what I respect about people older than me who have done the work like yourself, who have gone to therapy, who have done self-discovery, is they're unashamedly themselves. And I find that that is one of the biggest struggles of being young, is being okay with who I am and how I present myself as well. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think that aligns with one of the goals, I guess, and one of the visions I have for the podcast. I wanted to end by asking for the listeners how they can support Harambee and what they can do to get to know the organization better.
Yeah. One of the things, obviously, is pray for us. The work that we do, it never stops, and we need prayer always. The second thing is you can support financially. I have donors on a monthly basis who give $10, and I have donors who on a monthly basis give $2,000, and every gift in between. And the reason why I say talk about finances is because there is something really special about saying this money that I treasure, I want to invest it in a place that is investing in kids that I might not know, I might not ever get to meet, but that I know that they're sowing hope and I know that they're doing good work. Also, follow us on social media, subscribe to our emails, because I want to prove to you that what we're doing is good and holy work. And then also we're always down for tours. So if people are ever in Pasadena and want to come and walk around, I love giving tours of what we do and who we are, and all of that. It is the joy of my life. So those are the main ways. So obviously pray, support financially, and then follow us on all the digital platforms.
Right before this recording started, I realized that I had been to Harambee twice, I think, for
oh my gosh,
reunions for foster youth camp.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've actually shot around on the basketball hoop with one of the kids. So thank you for creating that moment for me, because that was a very fond memory for me.
Totally. This place, man, I always just say there's hope in the ground here. This is a 41-year-old organization that has just for decades been doing good community development, neighborhood-centered work. And so I'm so glad you got to do that. That's so awesome.
Thanks so much for your time and just being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was so great being here. Thank you for having me.